intro, and you can start with that. All right, let's get this show on the roll. This is Corey Maselli with the Sexy Viking, Matthias Bergstrom Anderson. I'm going to start with a little training talk to get the show rolling. Matthias, you said you had a question for me. Fire away.
Yeah, okay. So this is about training volume, especially while getting stronger, because as you know,
definitely loud. I mean, if it's rap or heavy metal, I prefer usually really loud right before the set, and then like it's just for to be polite, kind of turn it down between the heavy sets.
Right. Yeah, I mean, maybe one other time we should talk about like genes, blue genes, black genes, gray genes, all the kinds of genes in the world and how they affect a person's performance.
Yeah, I think blue jeans are definitely the best, man. I mean, black jeans in certain parts of the country are appropriate for like weddings and funerals, but standard old blue jean is my favorite.
Yeah, it's just so odd. Like the jeans you wear, they are determined so much about on like whether you pick some good or bad parents,
Yeah, well, like my one friend, for example, his family had an outdoor supply company. He had discounts in all the jeans for his whole life.
Yeah.
I'm just being a smart ass. But anyway, you had a question for me.
Yeah, that was gonna get totally away from us.
Exactly.
As you know, there are two different camps on training volume as a person gets stronger. Like one camp says the stronger you get, the less volume, the less number of exercises, total sets, total reps you're gonna be doing per workout, because lifting a heavier and heavier weight is fucking hard. At some point, you're not just lifting 300-400 pounds on a deadlift. Maybe you're lifting like 700 pounds, 800 pounds.
Gotcha.
And you're tired. The other camp says, well, the stronger you're getting, the more you will be used to training harder. So you will have a higher work capacity, a higher work ethic, and become able to train a lot more, even though it's getting heavier. Because that training also makes you stronger. So it kind of goes in cycles of, getting stronger, getting more endurance, etc., etc.
Yeah, well, I would say in a general sense, if you see, if we're talking like purely strength athletes, obviously power lifters in this case.
Yeah.
Let's if you look at a heavy training day for a pro level or world class level lifter, just the nature, there's training volume, there's training density. Meaning how much weight you're lifting in the given amount of time is more training density. Training volume is just the total amount of stuff that you do. There's probably a fancier way of articulating that. But like let's look at the Lily Bridge crew. They used to train at our Barbell Central gym. So those three undeniably, world-class pro top level raw lifters. And if you look at one of their workouts, for example, Eric Lily Bridge squatted like 1060 in training. The amount of take to the amount of work he had to do just to get up to that 1060 is like so much more total work than a person who say max effort is like 500 pounds or something. So I would say, from a pure bird's eye view looking in, I would say less volume in general, but that's because the amount of effort it takes to get to a top end, whatever that top end day happens to be, is so much more. That's what I'm looking for. The spectrum of energy that one has to apply to get to that real high level effort within a workout is so much higher than it was for that same person when they were achieving, say, a 500 pound max.
Okay, can you clarify?
Here's another way of looking at it. Let's say we're taking two race cars. If you have 1,000 horsepower race car and its top speed in a quarter mile race is, say, 180 miles per hour. If you go to a 2,000 horsepower race car, the top speed is not going to be 360 or whatever I said, 360 miles per hour. Let's say it's not going to doubling the energy putting into something is not necessarily doubling the apparent result. So there's a diminishing return, is what I'm trying to say. Like a 1,000 horsepower, 1,000 pound squat by an athlete takes so much more energy being compressed into that movement than a 500 pound squat. Does that make sense? Where it's, I don't have a way of truly articulating how this works from a scientific method. I really don't think anyone does, because there's so much to the human body that we just flat out don't really understand how it works. But from a mechanical sense, 1,000 pounds is twice as much as 500 pounds. But we all know the difference that it takes to do those two lifts are like miles and eons and freaking galaxies apart. So so for an athlete that has achieved an incredibly high level of output like that, there's a whole different recovery pace that needs to take place. So the simple answer, I would say, generally speaking, less volume, with the understanding that just the nature of them performing their work is a lot more work, just on the basic lifts.
Can you clarify a little bit more? Because obviously pushing through 1,000 pounds requires more effort than a 500 pounds. It's probably also harder on the bones. You might feel like your bones begin to bend, whether they are or not, I don't know, but it's going to feel very rough. But can you clarify the warm-up parts? Because I would think that, you're still jumping 10 to 15% of your max, starting at 40, 50%. So isn't it roughly the same number of warm-up sets that you would use, for 500 pounds to 1,000 pounds? Or do you do extra jumps just for safety?
More than one way to skin a cat, but you typically see bigger. I was the exception to the rule just because I was trying to conserve energy. So let's take me out of the equation. If you look at, let's look at a great geared lifter, Dave Hoff. If anyone knows who Dave Hoff is, he's of the top 20 all-time best geared totals. I think he has 12 of them or 14 of them. So the guy squats over 1,200 pounds consistently. So the details are important. World-class, highly consistent geared squatter. Let's take to the Lily Bridge crew. All-time best high performance raw squatters. And both of them give the same advice. For extra practice, take smaller jumps. I remember Dave Hoff did that was one of his big tips on, if you're in a heavy training crew, one thing he actually suggested, unless you're real close to a meet or something, is actually take smaller jumps to get more sets in. So for Dave, when he was in farther out from a meet, he would take the same size jumps, which would mean smaller percentage jumps, working his way up to that, whatever the top squat he had planned for the day.
Okay.
So I don't know, hope that answers the question a little bit.
Well, kind of, but let's say
there's always more than one way to skin a cat. But bottom line is, a bigger weight is going to demand a different type of recovery, just the nature of the sport.
Okay, so what you're saying is a 300-pound lifter might be doing normal size jumps, whereas a more experienced lifter might actually be using smaller jumps than a lot of other people, because they have the training aids to kind of feel out that, hey, this is actually going to help for me, and then leave the ego at the door. Is that kind of what you're getting at, maybe?
At times, that's a strategy I have seen some high-level lifters use. For example, I took but keep in mind, I was, for the sport, kind of up there in years, in my mid-40s, when I was handling the biggest weights possible. So I took a completely different approach, just because I figured the less at that time in my training life, that's after decades and decades of training and having, if you use the modern term GPP or general physical preparedness, I've had decades of physical preparedness. So the approach I would use is much different. When I was at my peak level of squat strength, I took a totally different approach, just because I specifically wanted less total sets to have to recover from. For example, I remember a day I squatted, let's just say, I remember particularly a day I squatted 1060, because that workout's fresh in my mind. My jumps were as follows, approximately as such. I brought 450 pounds for my first set, straight to 700, straight to 900, straight to 1060.
Yeah, now, that's hardcore.
Right. Now, keep in mind, I had been conditioned to take those types of jumps, and my body was very, very thoroughly warmed up prior to how many sets is that total? Four singles for that day. But keep in mind, I was very warmed up going into the first set. It's something I had conditioned to over a long period of time. And this was kind of I'm just taking an outside angle and answering your question. I intentionally, so I was in the camp in that period of time, as I would try to completely minimize the volume on my heavy days to save as much energy as possible for the absolute heaviest sets.
Yeah.
And I first learned let me add this. And so, age, experience, and all those, there's so many things that, eventually become a factor over time. But I remember a gentleman named Ernie Anderson. He was he was an interesting character. He was whatever, someone that studies bugs. I forget the fancy term for it. That's not important. It's nothing to do with the story. The guy was a really intelligent guy. He took his own approach to training, and he wanted to bench press. I don't think he really got serious about his powerlifting until he turned about 60, maybe even in his 60s, and he wanted to bench press 500 pounds. So he had a very methodical, slow approach. But lo and behold, like within a year, this guy, I cannot tell you the exact amount of strength he gained, but it was a lot. Let's put it that way. He just started, his workouts would look like approximately as follows. Let's say when he was at his peak strength. So forget talking about the buildups. He'd probably do 135 for one rep. He'd get kind of warmed up first. 135 for one rep. Then maybe go to 225 for a quarter rep. Like literally bring the bar down, just subtly, like just a little bit of movement to it. And he took that principle to such an extreme. He would literally just, once he felt reasonably warmed up, which wasn't that many sets, he would just literally get a lift off, hold the weight, visualize doing the weight, not actually do it, and re-rack it. And his results were undeniable. The guy did end up benching 500 pounds or a little more, in his 60s. And it just worked for him. So give me your thoughts on that, Matthias.
Well, I mean, that's the power of visualization and believing in yourself, right? I mean, which we talk about a lot. So,
and the guy did actually build a lot of muscle mass doing that. His accessory workouts were pretty minimal also. We're talking a few sets of triceps extensions and some heavy partial pull downs for his back. And to my knowledge, that's it. That's all he did. And it worked. He gained muscle mass. He looked good. I mean, the guy got pretty, someone that bench presses 500 pounds usually, somewhat looks the part. He definitely looked the part. He was brutally strong and big just from following that very minimalist approach. Why? Probably in largely part because he believed it would work. Therefore, it worked.
But didn't he actually do the lifts, or did he just visualize doing it?
He would get and many of the times he would get a lift off, just hold the lockout, and then visualize himself doing the lift with weight in his hands, and then rack it. So no rep would actually take place. It would just look like he was just doing a lockout hold for 5 seconds, and then rack it, put it back in the rack. Let me give you another example.
But would he never actually do the rep?
Pardon me?
Would he never actually do the rep on any of those workouts?
Well, he at whatever the heaviest weight for the day was, he would do that.
Okay, so he would still do full reps.
Full rep.
Yeah, he would still do a full rep, but just not all the way up.
No, he would do a full rep. He would basically work whatever his goal date, whatever his number that he had planned to hit that day. That was essentially be the only heavy set, only heavy rep he would do for the entire workout.
And then after he
would have a new benchmark. He would have a new benchmark for his heavy day. Let's say the same principle, whether his max was 420 pounds or 520 pounds. He would only do the last set as a full rep. He'd do a couple full reps with lightweight, maybe do a couple half reps or quarter reps, and then just do heavy holds until the very last set. And then he would do one full rep with his new goal weight, and then his workout was done.
So it's like a visualization and primer exercise. So he would hold it out, probably close his eyes and visualize going through the full rep a few times. And then he would take the weight out and actually do it.
And it worked for him. The guy got super strong. He got big, everything. He looked really good. He, even his training that heavy at that age, he just felt it was a safer, more effective way that was just the least common denominator of how to get strong, and it worked for him. There's no denying that.
I mean, oddly enough, it makes so much sense. I don't understand why I haven't heard of anyone doing it before now.
Exactly.
I mean, you're feeling the weight, you're compressed. I mean, you're not just sitting in a room and fucking meditating. You're actually in the fucking gym, you're holding a weight, you're feeling it, and you know how moving a weight is, so you can easily visualize it. You're in there under the weight actually. So
yep.
What better way to warm up than to actually hold some weights and visualize yourself doing the best you possibly can.
Right. I hear you. Well, and I remember Chuck Vogel. I was just, blessed enough to be able to hang out and talk to Chuck Vogelpohl a couple times. And one of the strategies he would use, this taking another approach. This is not really directly related to training volume, but something that Chuck would do frequently. Then I got another thing to mention about Chuck, but he would let's say his opening lift was 1,000. He would, in the warm-up room, load up to 1,100, just do a standing hold with 1,100, get his body acclimated to that heavier weight. So when he got to the platform, this psychologically, the weight felt lighter. Now, keep in mind, Chuck is also famous, at least on more than one occasion, for kind of badly missing his first couple attempts and then jumping up weight each time, and then just absolutely annihilating his third attempt. Now, I've also seen meets where Chuck looked spot on, flawless all three attempts. Boom, boom, boom. Each one looked equally superior. So, but there's been a couple occasions where Chuck would completely goof up on whatever his first lift or first couple lifts were, and then come back and hit his third attempt flawlessly, just as it was like a planned effort. That's really not anything to do directly with what you said, his performance of the platform, but maybe that's what led him to do a heavier overload in the warm-up room. So when he would get to the platform, the opener would feel lighter. Now that I'm thinking about it, as I recall, those meets I referenced where he did miss his first couple attempts or two, or a first attempt or two, I think we're a little earlier in his career, because I think in his, when he was really at that upper echelon performance, I recall him smashing all three lifts, boom, 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 like butter.
Mm.
So, and again, I'm sure there's exceptions where the training volume is really, really high, and people have had success with that. I just personally have not witnessed it.
Mm. Like you said, he did partial, quarter pull downs, and I remember you also said that only France would do them. What is the theory behind them?
Well, you could A, handle more weight. B, once your shoulder girdle, if you watch someone do a pull down, once those shoulder blades retract and depress, that effort is achieved approximately halfway into the pull down. And you could even do a straight arm pull down if you want. You can retract and depress your shoulder blades without even bending your elbows. So Ernie's philosophy on that was just handling maximum weight. You're targeting your back, not your arms. And once you're pulling more than halfway down, it's more of a demand in your arms than just your back. So he said that way it felt to me more like a purely back exercise and not as much of a back/arm exercise.
Mm. I mean, I actually tried it the other day. I just don't think I told you, because you said it and I remember it and I wanted to try it. And I kind of felt it was easier to do it right and get tension in the right places. But then again, my pecs have some sort of tendon muscular issue that the bottom is just a little bit tricky sometimes, doing it evenly. And I mean, right. the way I was brought up to do it with other people were to really get down and touch my chest on stuff like pull downs and rows, and really get that middle and lower trap involved as much as possible, because they don't get nearly as much involved in the first half of the rep as they do when you get really, really close to the chest. And one issue with it is that.
Are you sure about that? Because biomechanically speaking, I don't see what would be the limiting factor. I don't see what bending your elbows farther. I don't see how that's really going to impact the function of your back. I'm just going through the motion right now, and I don't see literally. I don't see how bending my elbow is really going to change the function much, as long as my mind muscle connection is on point.
Well, it's more like getting your elbows closer to the center of the body and even past it, which is gonna actually be hard for the lat to do, because the lat puts the elbow, the arm to the center. So getting to the center is hard. Then getting past the center, away from the center, is really weird for in a way, But we would try it. They would have us do it on a pull down row, where you lean back while you pull down. You lean forward again while you lift the weight up, and they would do it on a seal row, where we are lying face down on a bench. Let's put on some boxes and hold a barbell and pull all the way up until you hear you're pulling it against the bench itself, because it cannot come any higher. just that
Right, I
last.
understand. So you're rolling into a static point, and pulling becomes isometric at the top point of the movement.
I mean, you could do it as an isometric, or you just hit it, like pause for half a sec to a second, and then just go down. But the point is
That's an isometric.
it does become at the peak contraction, sure. But the point is that just that last inch, getting it all the way up to the bench, I mean, that would feel so much harder between it would exhaust you so much more between your shoulder blades.
Right. Actually, I know that's an actual exercise for strength athletes that compete with benchers, geared benchers, because that is a big component of a successful geared benching, is actually pulling the bar into that correct position. So I was thinking in that respect, A, I think it's a good exercise in general. B, if you're a geared bencher, I think it's a phenomenal exercise because it's going to build strength in a area of the movement that's actually, highly, it places a high demand on like that function of your arm/back movement. So in that case, I think you do want to train your arms and back, in harmony.
Yeah, like don't go into the camp of always doing full range of motion and always doing partial range of motion,
Yeah, I think it was interesting. Like when we did our interview with Vince Anello, one of the best deadlifters of all time. I've heard like, on paper doing, and I've heard or seen evidence that doing negatives with conventional deadlifts is like not a good idea. Whereas Vince said that was like one of the main components of his strength progress. So I don't think we can sit here and say he was wrong.
I've never understood that people would say that doing the eccentric part of a deadlift is dangerous. I mean, what's so special about doing an eccentric on a deadlift versus a squat or a bench or whatever? Like,
I think it's with deadlift. I mean, I just think you're at risk, for like tipping forward too much, so your lower back. Yeah, I think it does carry a greater risk, but it's up to the athlete to minimize that risk. Maybe he's wise enough where if you feel yourself getting out of a good position, you dump it, get out of that position as fast as possible. Like I remember Mark Bell talking about like heavy pin presses. They're very effective for building raw benches. They do carry a great risk also. So oftentimes the exercises that have the greatest potential for building your strength fast often carry a great risk.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I just think I would rather do like an eccentric deadlift than an eccentric squat if safety is the issue,
Yeah, well, again, are we talking like world-class power lifters, or are we talking about someone just, maintaining their general body health? That's a big difference, big factor.
Can you elaborate that difference?
Well, if your goal is like elite, if your goal is a world record, you better be willing to take some pretty significant risks, because you have to go into a territory that hasn't been like, you got to do things somewhat different. Whereas, maintaining your general health and well-being and that sort of thing, why would you, if your number one goal is to maintain your health and wellness, why would you really want to take any like sort of risk of that nature? Because it's counterproductive to the main goal, at hand.
Oh yeah, but what I meant was that I think it would be safer, at least for me, to do like a slow eccentric on a deadlift than on a squat when it comes to tipping over,
Well, I'd say I'd kind of put you in the middle. You're maybe a little more extreme in your approach than just general health. Yet I've never heard you say your number one goal is to set a world record. So plus you really enjoy learning and like doing new things. So in your case, I would suggest definitely do it. Just understand there's an inherent risk for getting out of place and putting too much pressure on that lower back. So this is my 2 cents on the issue.
I mean, I will say I have a pretty good build for deadlift. So me getting a little bit forward, one, it's a bit less unlikely than for so many other people, and B, that it is not that bad for me, honestly. I just notice it right away. It's only a little bit. I either correct it or I let go of the bar, or I just go down with it. Like for me, it's like the easiest in the world to deadlift.
Gotcha.
So for a squat, that's a bit difficult for me. But I was also taking like the general person. I mean, dumping a squat bar versus dumping a deadlift bar when you come forward, it's pretty big hassle. Whereas on deadlift, well, if a lot of load comes on your back, it's very hard on your back. What the body does to protect the back is to not like inhibit the strength in the fingers so that your hands open and you let go of the bar.
Yeah, well, bottom line is, if you're getting out of that position as fast as possible is critical. No doubt about that.
Yeah. I mean, if you try to hold on to it for longer, you might fuck some shit up. I mean, there's always that risk for sure.
No doubt. Well, I'm going to jump subjects on you. Getting back to the the mind, universal consciousness, like general, like changes in the paradigm of all physical performance. Like, one thing I've noticed in the United States is, even when I first started my sports performance business, strength training for certain athletes was still kind of taboo, even though now it's like such commonplace. It's not like much of a thought. But when I first introduced the very, I'll use the word advanced or at least comprehensive strength training program into the competitive swimming community, man, it was met with an uproar. And then people, it was so different, it was out of character, that people just were scared of it because it was new. Our athletes started just smashing records and totally kicking ass. And so, of course, initially, everybody assumed it was some kind of performance enhancing drugs or this or that, where certainly there's nothing like that at play at all. And then now, if you look, 20 years later, comprehensive strength training in the sport of swimming is just absolutely part of every major collegiate program. So to that, the point I'm trying to make is when that whole universal consciousness or understanding of what is generally accepted changes, I'm saying it has almost what's what I'm looking for. Just the general expectation on outcomes changes so much that it literally changes the nature of one's DNA. What do you think of that, Matthias?
Yeah, that the way you are thinking, the thought patterns you allow to perpetuate into the deep roots.
Pause on that. No. Pause on that. Let's go back. This might be a better way for the listeners to understand what I'm saying. I was watching some highlights from the 1985 Bears Super Bowl champion team the other day. And if you look at those athletes compared to the modern NFL football team, they look like junior high kids. In general, you might be able to pluck one or two of them off the field and put them in the modern day. We've had kind of that discussion before. But literally, if you look at a modern NFL team compared to the NFL team of the 1970s or 1980s, the difference is so radical and so blatant and obvious. It's almost you would almost believe evolution has taken place. Not really evolution, obviously. They're the same human beings, but their beliefs, their understandings, the expectation of what high performance is keeps changing. Therefore, this ties into the meditation, the belief itself subject that we got into with Vincentello too. But when there's that universal consciousness change of belief, somehow people just adapt differently and rise to that expectation, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, because now they're starting to tell themselves better lies, Before they might be telling themselves lies about how, I had bad genetics, or my parents were bad for me and now I will always be shit, something like that. Now they're telling themselves a lie well, I'm so close to becoming the best of this sport I'm playing, or I'm definitely gonna have it all, stuff like that. Stuff they don't even know for sure are gonna happen, but they're telling themselves they know it for sure. And that's kind of a lie, even though it turns out to be true.
Yeah, well, it's kind of so that's that's belief. So faith is something, is belief in something that is you don't see or is not yet happened. So I'm not certain, in that respect, so I don't like to use the term lie, because it's a decision, because there's nothing in our life happens until it happens. So what kind of belief are we going to have about the future?
I'm kind of trying just to get a point across of how you view things, because we want to be honest, we want honesty, but sometimes what we think is honest is a blatant lie about how we are not good enough, or how we suck at this or that or the other. So if you're going to tell ourselves something we don't quite know for sure is faith, it might be a lie, whatever. Why not tell ourselves something good so we can actually get after things and wake the fuck up and get a fire in our eyes, So
Oh,
not
absolutely.
not necessarily like you are a liar, but I mean, we do have so many thoughts. The subconscious part of our brain, our mind makes up like 95% of our mind. You think that's honest all the time, or it's just picking up of things you've told yourself sometimes, and it's kind of constructing these lies that you may not even be aware of, you know?
Well, like my brother Paul Wise just recently made this post. A person will never rise above their opinion of themselves. So,
For sure.
Again, it kind of ties into what you're saying. But what control over the future do we have? Probably a lot more than we realize. So, again, there's a woman I know who does more or less like life coaching and empowerment training and that sort of thing. And she put a post on Facebook today. What advice would you give somebody that just feels stuck in their life? And the advice that I gave is just start doing everything different. Break that pattern. Get up on the opposite side of bed that you usually do. Leave out of the back door. Take a different route to work. Shop at a different grocery store. Whatever it is, just literally the smaller things that you can identify that you can change a pattern with, do it just to show yourself that you are capable of making changes that are different, like breaking patterns that you may have established over the course of time. Then maybe, then take it a step further. But anyway, that was just kind of something that came up earlier today.
Yeah, I mean, gotta shake those patterns up because patterns get stuck, like a track in snow, and I mean, if you do something differently, then you begin to kind of think differently. You begin to kind of like remove that track a little bit. You get to do something else, and also you're just taking action. Like, how many times have you heard people say, I'll start on Monday. I'll turn my entire life around on Monday.
Right. Yeah. Do it now. The thing Arnold said, man.
Yeah. Do something the fuck now. I mean, do put the candy bar away right now. Don't just not eat it tomorrow.
Eat it right now.
Go for a walk right now. Sprint a little bit, I mean,
absolutely, brother. No doubt. Stop watching fucking TV. My goodness, people.
Stop listening to us. You have better things to do than listening to radio.
Yeah, they're gonna want to hear this next story, though. I promise. Yeah, but to the point being, if you do feel stuck in anything, in whatever aspect of your life, do something different. Even if it's a tiny little thing different, build on that, because it's going to just at least as an exercise or a small experiment, just to reinforce the notion that you are capable of being different or becoming different or doing different things. I had a friend who, this person had advice, had an assignment from their therapist, was just to simply look in the mirror and tell themselves, I love you. And it took the person like 6 months trying it every day to be able to say it, man. So I think sometimes, then again, that was breaking a pattern. This was a person obviously had a hard time loving themselves, and like getting to that point to break through and just somehow have a breakthrough to be able to articulate the fact that they did love themselves took 6 months of like daily effort. But they broke through it, they did it, and moved forward, like I would say quite successfully in their approach of like improving their self-perspective or self-worth or self-confidence, however you want to describe it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you do have to do something every day. Don't start later, start now. Start telling yourself something right now. Something that feels good about how good you are. Tell yourself you have the best blue jeans in the entire world, Right. I don't even care if you believe it. Lie to yourself if you have to lie. Just fucking say it.
Well, I don't like using the word lie because we're talking about something in the future. No, make it a freaking fact, man. Make it a statement of like reality. I'm kind of harping on that, but I've been guilty of lying to myself before about things. Fuck that. I don't want to lie to myself about anything. I just want to be brutally dead nuts honest with myself, no matter what that takes. So, I mean, for me, it's kind of like a trigger word. I don't want to, I do not want to lie to myself. I want to tell myself the brazen truth. The truth is I have control over my reality to an extent. I want to maximize that extent. And then when I don't have control over, I have control over how I react to it. So I think that's important too to understand. We always have control in the way and the manner in which we decide to react to the things that happen to us also.
Yeah, or respond rather than reaction.
So Matthias, we got to be coming up on about the half-hour mark here. Why don't we take a little break and we'll get down to business here in a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Alrighty.